Welcome to Trinity Church of Austin. I'm Sid, Trinity's lead minister. Because of the coronavirus emergency, we are streaming our services on the internet rather than holding in-person worship. We wish that we could come back together in person, but right now we believe this is the safest thing to do. We are taking this pandemic seriously, and we're following the guidance of the CDC and the current standards that are put out by the United Methodist Church in our area, as well as the United Church of Christ, and we will be doing this for the foreseeable future. Phone numbers for texting us through prayer requests, downloadable order of worship, email for Pastoral Care, and instructions for supporting Trinity are all in the description of the YouTube video, and much of this information will appear on the screen. As early as the 6th century, a theologian described God as beguiled by beauty. The Creator was lured to create by a longing for beauty, and so set in motion a world of immense diversity and generativity. We were made for this divine generativity. We were made inherently worthy, not by our own doing, but by simply being. All things are beautiful, not by a standard of pretty as seen by our eyes, but by an essence of sacred worth that is sensed by the Spirit. In this worship series entitled Beguiled by Beauty, we will dwell with the God of divine beauty, who is deeply in love with us. Together, we will practice returning that divine passion as we fall more fully in love with creation and with each other. The message today is entitled, We Are Made for the Beloved. At the end of our welcome time, we will light a candle to begin our worship together and to create sacred space. We will do this every week during our online worship service, so if you have a candle at home and you'd like to light it with us, please feel free to do so. Please know that whether we're meeting in person or online, at Trinity we believe that no matter who you are, who you love, what you believe or what you don't believe, you are welcome here. Welcome to the celebration, my friends.
A Christian mystic of the 14th century, Julian of Norwich, lived during one of the worst centuries of human history, including the Black Death pandemic that wiped out millions of people, famines, floods, war, and corruption. In her writing, she addresses what she believed to be at the root of suffering, the misplaced idea of God's rejection. Without this core belief in beauty and sacred worth, we engage in self and other destroying behaviors, inducing further suffering. Contemplative practices invite us into union with the Divine One, healing the wounds of forgetfulness.
For the beauty of the earth, for the glory of the skies, for the love which from our birth over and around us lies. God of all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise.
Hi Trinity, my name is Emma, and today I wanted to share this story with you. It's called My Heart Fills with Happiness. My heart fills with happiness when I see the face of someone I love, when I smell bannock baking in the oven, when I sing. My heart fills with happiness when I feel the sun dancing on my cheeks, when I walk barefoot in the grass, and when I dance. My heart fills with happiness when I hold the hand of someone I love, when I listen to stories, and when I drum. So what fills your heart with happiness? I hope you're all able to take a moment today and maybe think about some small acts that bring you happiness and make your heart feel really full. It could be baking something, it could be calling someone on the phone, or it could just be taking a couple deep breaths and walking around outside. Find what works for you, and I hope you're able to find some moments of happiness this week. But I miss you all, and I hope you have a great week. Bye.
Hi, I'm Tim Brace, Director of Music at Trinity Church of Austin. For this series and our meditations, we're going to engage in Visio Divina, which is a form of divine seeing in which we invite God to speak to our hearts. Please sit in a comfortable position, relax your body. In Visio Divina, we gaze at an image and are present to it without any particular goal other than allowing it to speak to us wordlessly with a divine voice. Allow your mind and heart to receive the beauty of the image and the music, the movement, the colors, the patterns of image and sound as an encounter with the divine. Or sit quietly with your eyes closed and listen to the music, opening your heart to the sounds of the instruments, the movement of the harmonies, the patterns, and the richness of all of these together. Receive this music as an encounter with the divine, and let it share with you the beauty of creation.
Morning. I'm Mark Moore. I'm the Associate Minister at Trinity. Each week during our prayer time, we receive dozens of prayers. So please keep your prayer texts brief. And if we don't get time for your prayer, please feel free to type your prayer into the video chat box. We record all of these prayers and review them together as a staff. So now I invite you into a time and an attitude of prayer. Are there prayers now that you would offer for our lives and for our community? Please text your brief prayers to 512-766-3123. Prayers, please, for my daughter Anna, who was hospitalized last night in New York, and for her healing and joyful spirit. receive our prayers. Prayers for the healing of Brittany, hospitalized with complications following the birth of her son, Gus. Healing and joyful spirit, receive our prayers. Please pray for Devin Henry and his girlfriend Kelly as they suffer from the virus. Healing and joyful spirit, receive our prayers. For Kurt German's birthday tomorrow, joyful and healing spirit, receive our prayer. Thanks for the birth of the first grandchild of Debbie Loomis and Lee Gordon. Joyful and healing spirit, receive our prayers. Healing prayer for all humanity in the face of this pandemic. For any trans folk affected by the Trump administration removing trans no discrimination provisions from the ACA. Prayers for healing and joy for Solomon, who finished his chemo last Friday. Healing and joyful spirit, receive our prayers. Prayers for the Trinity staff. As we continue distancing, know that we are with you. And now, let's hold these prayers and those cradled in the silence of our hearts for a moment of silence. Now be in the spirit of prayer. Divine Lover, Holy One, pause us for this moment. Bear us up in this time. Hold us forever. We open to your warming presence. We remember we came from you. We affirm all beings are your beloveds. In your many names we pray. Amen.
We want to take a moment here to listen to a new piece from Tom Prasada Rao entitled $20 Bill for George Floyd. Tom says this about the piece. Thursday night I was watching CNN, watching the protests in Minneapolis. It's breaking my heart. And this song started coming to me, and so I just paid attention to it. I wrote it down. I didn't let my pen stop. I'm not really in good form these days towards the end of my chemo. It's kind of hard for me to do anything properly right now, but I was able to get it down before I forgot it. Here is Chris Gage, who has a special relationship in our hearts here at Trinity, with his rendition of $20 Bill.
Some people die for honor. Some people die for love. Some people die while singing to the heavens above. Some people die believing in the cross and Calvary Hill. Some people die in the blink of an eye for a $20 bill. Some people die in glory, yeah, with the wind at their back. Some get to tell their own story, write their own epitaph. Sometimes you see it coming, sometimes you don't know until you run out of breath with a knee on your neck for a $20 bill. Oh, brother, I never knew you. No, I never will. But I make this promise to you, I'll remember you still. So now let this be our communion. It's time to break the bread. Do this in remembrance, just like the good book said. Sometimes the wine is a sacrament, but sometimes the blood is just spilled. Sometimes the law is the devil's last straw, the future unfulfilled. Like the dream they killed for a $20 bill. For a $20 bill.
For this series, we are singing the Lynn Unger song, Come, Come, Whoever You Are, for our song of reflection. Lyrics are from the Sufi mystic poet Rumi. We are delighted to have this video put together for us by our own Mark Boyden, and also the talents of Dave Robinson and Carol Lewis in creating for us a body prayer set to the music. Light German has joined them in presenting the body prayer, and our choir gathered virtually to provide the song for you to sing along with. Lauren has provided her usual fine piano accompaniment. Please stand in body and/or spirit and sing with us.
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of living, ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of living, ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come.
Good morning. My name is Joanne Holliday, and I've been a member of Trinity Church for 25 years. I'll be reading this morning from Words on Beauty by Marcia McBee. A Christian mystic of the 14th century, Julian of Norwich, lived during the worst centuries of human history, including the Black Death pandemic that wiped out millions of people, famines, floods, war, and corruption. In her writing, she addressed what she believed to be at the root of suffering, the misplaced idea of God's rejection. Suffering is part of being human, but what makes suffering so soul-destroying is our forgetfulness that God is with us. Without this core belief in beauty and sacred worth, we engage in self and other destroying behaviors, inducing further suffering. Contemplative practices invite us into union with the Divine One, healing the wounds of forgetfulness.
Hi, my name is Karen Hampton. I've been a member of Trinity for about 20 years. The second reading is from Psalms, Psalm 16, verses 7 through 11 from the Inclusive Bible. I praise the Holy One who guides me. Even at night, my heart teaches me. I'm always aware of your presence. You are right by my side, and nothing can shake me. My heart is happy, and my tongue sings for joy. I feel completely safe with you, because you won't abandon me to the grave. You won't let your loved one see decay. You show me the path to life. Your presence fills me with joy. Beautiful things are always in your right hand.
I have a long list of favorite movies, but one of them would have to be The Matrix that came out in 1999. Besides having just an amazing storyline, an apocalyptic type battle between good and evil, and the confusion at times about who is good and who is not good. The thing that I think that I loved the most about that film was not the storyline, but the cinematography. How everything could slow down in this person's frame while everything was spinning outside in total chaos. There was something about that really grabbed me. And then a year later, the movie Crouching Tiger and Hidden Dragon used some of the same cinematography. And I realized what I like about that is that that's how it often feels in real life, that we are moving along And then all these things just seem to spin all out here, almost as if they're in slow motion around us, and that we're watching it, we're observing it, we're a part of it, and yet it feels like it's beyond any of our control. And I know that that's what people are feeling right now, this sense of chaos and absolute confusion in the midst of pandemic. Things are opening back up again, and yet we're seeing, as soon as they open up, that the numbers are rising once again exponentially. We're in the midst of street protests that, like nothing I've ever seen in my lifetime, not just here in the United States, not just in the big cities, but in small little towns that you never imagined there would be a protest for Black Lives Matter, and not just in the United States, but in Canada and in Europe and even in Tokyo. I mean, this is an absolutely amazing kind of groundswell of activism. And all these things seem to be happening simultaneously, and yet there's a part of us that wants to engage, that needs to engage, that wants some resolution to be connected to ourselves, but we feel like it's all happening outside of our purview, outside of our control. That is the nature of the game. And what's interesting to me is that that the circumstances that we're currently in, that are so overwhelming, are no different in some ways than the way they've always been. There have always been pandemics, maybe localized, but when the Ebola pandemic happened in Africa, we were aware of it, but it didn't affect many of us. But there were those at that time that felt that everything was being destroyed around them, and in fact, it was. The crisis that we see over racial tensions right now. I heard a commentator say the other day that we're not in a new crisis. This crisis has been happening for 400 years. It's just that white people are finally waking up to it. And my hope is that that is true. So these things have always been in existence. They're always a part of us. And to some extent, our life is not about removing ourselves from it or figuring out a way to escape from it. That never seems to completely work. But it's about finding a way to live in the midst of that. How do we live in the midst of our struggles that are going on? One of the great inspirations to me is the medieval mystic Julian of Norwich. Julian was a nun and an anchorite in the town of Norwich, and at that time, in the 1400s, was or 14th century really. She lived toward the end of the 14th century and into the 15th century. Julian was in the town of Norwich, which at that time was second to London in terms of trade and importance in Britain. So it was a big town and had multiple churches and businesses. And this is where she lived most of her life. Julian understood that was an important center for commerce, but her life was connected to the church. And in her short lifetime, some significant things happened in Britain and in the world, and those were directly impacting in the city of Norwich. There was the Black Death that happened from 1348 to 1350. That was a bacteria resulting from a rat flea. But of course they didn't know that then. And so they wondered what was going on and how could this happen and are we the next person to die? And when we look at the the devastating toll of death in Europe, it's just astounding, and that included the city of Norwich. In addition to the Black Death, she lived through what scholars now call the Peasants' Revolt, and that revolt may have been, at least in recorded history, the first modern peasant revolt. It happened in 1381, and this was during the time of the adolescent King Richard II, and it was a time that the England was taxing the poorest of the poor, those who were serfs, to uphold a monarchy that was in some ways decimated of its money because of the Crusades. And so this is a time when those in power, those who were elite, those who you might say were the 1%, were asking the 99% to do more. And of course, this came right on the heels of the great pandemic of the Black Death. And so, and of course, just like today, where people of color and people who are poor and people who experience homelessness are the principal ones to be affected by the pandemic, the same was true in England in the Middle Ages. They were the ones, and then they're being asked to divvy out more of their money to support this monarchy, which they didn't agree with. So that was the Peasants' Revolt, and that happened, and there were great riots of great protests, you might say, not really riots. The English aristocracy called it riots, but they were protests. And some say that it didn't end when Richard finally put it down. That it continued to create a consciousness. He abolished serfdom in the middle of that revolt, but of course later when he put down the revolt, he revoked those laws that he had promised. But the consciousness of freedom never left, and so there are some historians that believe that this was really the beginning of modern day freedom in terms of democracy. So it's a really interesting time. Julian lived in the midst of that. And then right there in Norwich, along with many other places in Europe, was something called the suppression of the Lollards. The Lollards were a group led by John Wycliffe, who was a Catholic priest who you could say was instigating or advocating for ideas that we think of as Protestantism today. He for instance said that perhaps a person could reach the heavens without being baptized. Woo! He said that the bread and the wine of the Eucharist is not actually, the transubstantiation does not actually become the body and blood of Christ, but he believed in sort of what Luther would later call consubstantiation, this idea that we're all lifted up in spirit to this higher place where we become one with Christ in that. These are the things that wars were fought over in the Middle Ages, and many people died for this. But it was not a popular revolt in Britain especially, and it was put down rather violently. And in fact, in Norwich, a group of Lollards, mostly priests, but also involving some of those same peasants that had been involved in the Peasants' Revolt, were taken out to the edge of town and were burned at the stake. And to this day, that place outside, which is now part of the city of Norwich, is called Lollard's Pit. And so this is what Julian lived in the midst of. She knew that chaos, and she could have been that person standing in that space in the matrix and watching all these things flying around her, the Black Death, the suppression of the Lollards, the peasants' revolt, and these were all a part of her reality. And one of the remarkable things that she writes in her poetry is, and you'll like this this phrase, because this is good theology. She said, "If there's anything on earth, a lover of God who is always kept safe, I know nothing of it, for it was not shown to me. But this was shown, that in falling and rising again, we are always kept in that same precious love." I'm going to repeat that. If there is anywhere on earth a lover of God who is always kept safe, I know nothing of it, for it was not shown to me. But this was shown, that in falling and rising again, we are always kept in the same precious love. In other words, Julian wouldn't have had any use for those little prescriptions that come when people are uncomfortable. Like, well, we know that God has a purpose in this. Or, we just can't understand everything about God, and so, but this is God's will, and we just have to go with it. Or, all things happen for a reason, and so, in other words, quit whining and keep moving forward. She wouldn't have approved of that kind of getcha theology, because she understood in her own experience that these things like the Black Death, these things like the suppression of the peasants' revolt, that these were created out of the circumstances of life, and that were not caused because of anything in one's relationship with God or even outside of one's relationship. What she believed is that in the midst of that, in the midst of this rising and falling of our own life, that we are kept in this precious love. In other words, folks, I can't tell you why this is happening, and I'm not going to give an easy prescription for it. But I can tell you this: you are not alone. Because the God who made you, the God who loves you, continues to love you and is always with you. One of the things that most pastors recognize is that feeling of not knowing what to say in a terrible situation. I can remember many things throughout my ministry, walking in and to a young couple that had had a stillborn child, and they were looking for some word from me, something to bring comfort. And I knew not to say one of those ridiculous phrases, but I didn't know what to say. And so afterwards, after sitting there awkwardly for seems like a long time, I said a prayer. We baptized the stillborn child, and I left. And I got a letter sometime after that said, "Pastor, you said just the right thing." And I'm thinking, I didn't say anything. I didn't say the right thing because I didn't know what to say. But I didn't say the wrong thing. But what I did was show up. What I did was be there. And maybe that's one of the most painful things about the pandemic, is that we have people who need to be visited in the hospital. We have people who are alone in the nursing home, people that are dying who cannot be with their own family because of safe distancing that's required. And so it must be the cruelest of cruelty to die alone in the midst of this pandemic time. Julian had a vision, and she was seriously ill and was even on her deathbed, and people thought that she was going to die. And out of that, she had what she called showings of the Passion of Christ, and she felt herself connected to Christ's suffering and the pain of Christ, and she felt the pain of the people in her city. She felt the pain of the poor. She felt the pain of those who had lost loved ones and whole family members and whole villages in the Black Death. She was feeling all of that as the suffering of Christ. And in the midst of that suffering, she realized that suffering is what it means to be human. It is just part of our humanness. But what makes suffering soul destroying is our forgetfulness that God is with us. And so in her revelations and her showings, she had this profound sense that even when we feel most alone, and maybe especially when we feel most alone, we are held by a divine love, by a mystery that is beyond words and yet envelopes us and holds us and lets us know that we are not alone. And so the best thing we can do is to be that presence. I know that we are all feeling a sense of inadequacy in the midst of this. Is there something more I can be doing? If you're one of those who has not been able to join the protests because of compromised immune system yourself, or even connection with those, or because of age, or because you have the responsibility of children, or whatever it is, I know that one of the sentiments that's being felt is guilt. I should be out there raising my voice. There are multiple ways to raise your voice. It's not always required to be out on the streets, but that may be one part of it. And so we should not be in this place where we're judging each other if we're out on the street or if we're not on the street. But I know that all those emotions and all those kinds of struggles are so much a part of us. Julian understood those struggles in her time. And in the midst of recovering in this illness, she wanted people to know that this showing of God's presence was for them and could get them through. It wasn't going to fix everything. It wasn't going to make everything all right, but it was a way to say that the one who loves you has not abandoned you. You are not alone. You are not alone. Another quote that I love from her, and they say that Julian was one of the first medieval feminists. She wrote about not only God but Christ as in the feminine, and often calling Christ mother. And she, they think, was perhaps the first English writer in history that we know of. Her writings, the reflections on her revelations, her visions, are written in English, and they're written before the Authorized Version or the King James Version. And so that's the earliest known text we have of that. But here's the other quote that I like. She said, "Our Savior is our true mother, in whom we are endlessly born, and out of whom we shall never come." Interesting. So in other words, even though we're being born constantly, we're also still enveloped in the womb of the Divine Mother, the Divine Christ Mother. She was convinced that the simple little answers that people give to try to bring comfort only end up ultimately causing harm. But what is true is that we are loved and held by the one who gives birth to us, and the one whom holds us in in his or her womb. Very powerful. The passage from the Psalms that we heard today also indicates this. There's a powerful line that says, I am always aware of your presence. You are right by my side, and nothing can shake me. There is the sense that that sometimes the answers are really not what we're seeking, even if we think that's what it is. If I could just figure out what's causing this pandemic, if we can just do that, then everything's going to be okay. If I could just figure out why systemic racism has been the original sin of this country, and how I'm a part of it, and how I'm a culpable in it, if I could just figure that out, then it will all be fixed. And even though we know when we say it out loud, it just sounds ridiculous. I think that goes on in our minds. But what if it's not about having the answer always? What if it's about holding each other? The powerful part of the protests are not that the people holding the signs and that are showing up have the answers. It's that they're showing up for each other. That white people are showing up to be with black people. Not that white people have the answers. That's not what it's about. But they're being present, saying, I know that this is not my struggle, but I am here with you in your struggle, and I am not going to go away. Julian had a famous line that many people quote, and it is this: all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of thing shall be well. Now, if you hear that, not knowing the context of her life, you think, what does she know about my life? There's nothing well about what's happening in our culture. There's nothing well about the family struggles that my family's having. There's nothing well about the cancer that I've been fighting. There's nothing well. There's nothing well. There's nothing well. What does she know? Well, she knew. She lived it. She experienced it in her lifetime, in her century, maybe more than many of us will ever experience. And yet she still could say that. So it wasn't a Pollyanna statement. It wasn't something that was said in denial. It was something that was said through the pain, through the struggle, in the suffering. And it was, I believe, saying ultimately that we are held, we are loved. As she said, but this was shown, that in falling and rising again, we are always kept in that same precious love. That is what it meant for her to be well. I know we can't hold each other right now, at least physically. But I invite you to find a way to hold each other in love more powerfully than maybe you've ever done before. And find ways to remind the people around you, the people that you love, the people with whom you're separated from, and those people that are in your life and maybe even outside of the boundaries of your usual life. Let them know that they're not alone. They're not alone in the struggle for Black Lives Matter. They're not alone in the struggle for survival in a worldwide pandemic. They're not alone in the midst of a political turmoil, in the midst of voter suppression, in the midst of craziness in politics like we haven't seen, at least that I can think of in my lifetime. But even in the midst of that, we can be with each other. We can hold each other in love. This last week, I listened to the words that Joe Biden said to the daughter of George Floyd, and was absolutely moved by that. that's the kind of compassion we need. Is to He didn't make it about the politics, although I'm sure he was very astutely aware of the political implications of anything he said, realistically, of course. But he spoke to the little girl, and he talked about how her father loved her and would always love her, and that nothing could take that away. I found that very powerful. Hold each other, my friends. Hold each other in love. The way Julian held the people in her life, the way God our Mother, Christ our Mother, holds us in love, because all shall be well. All shall be well, and all manner of thing shall be well. Amen.
For more than 30 years, Howard Hanger served as an ordained minister in the United Methodist Church. He left the denomination so that he could continue to officiate same-sex ceremonial unions. He is founder of the Jubilee Community in North Carolina, which is dedicated to celebrating life and faith through the arts and embracing creation spirituality. My own communications with Howard, asking for permission to include Anam Cara in our songbook, went like this. Hi Howard, there's a song attributed to you, Anam Cara. We love this song here at Trinity. Would we be able to obtain permission to include it in our songbook? His reply, Yo, Tim. Yes, I did write Anam Cara, music and words. Use it as you will. However, being an Irish tune written in Ireland, it's always better after a glass or two of good whiskey. Just saying. I won't comment on his last suggestion. Please stand in body and or spirit, and let's sing Anam Cara together.
In the midst of the morning we awaken to all of the gifts of the day. We open our hearts to take it all in and give it all back in a way. Let us sing of the beauty around us. Let us sing of the beauty within. Oh, hear the earth tell that all shall be well. Anam Cara, so friend. We're part of it all in our sorrow. We're part of it all in our bliss. We're part of the sun and we're part of the rain. We're all part of God's holy kiss. Let us sing of the beauty around us. Let us sing of the beauty within. Oh, hear the earth tell that all shall be well. Anam Cara, so friend. Let us sing of the beauty around us. Let us sing of the beauty within. Oh, hear the earth tell that all shall be well. Anam Cara, so friend.
Now is the time that we bring forth our offerings. In our worship space at Trinity, we always have two opportunities for our offerings: a wooden bowl for the support of the programs and ministries of Trinity. And even as we are now feeling the tension between continuing social distancing and the desire of many to return to shopping and dining out and worshiping together. Your support of Trinity remains critical for us to meet our commitment to put the well-being of the community and the broader community first in our hearts and in our actions. And that means to continue worshiping online a while longer, and to continue paying the dedicated folks who work with our children and our hourly staff, and to make our facilities available to Hope Food Pantry and the Homeless Task Force. We also always have a woven basket for a special offering to support that broader community. And this week, it is Texas Cure. When Trinity's beloved Bernie Tiede was able to worship with us, he told us about an amazing program called Texas Cure that provides fans for Texas state prisoners. Did you know that the Texas state prisons are not air-conditioned? Prisoners and guards alike suffer from the heat. In cells and halls, temperatures can exceed 120 degrees. Texas Cure provides free fans for needy and inmates who have no family or friends for financial support. Now, there are several methods that you can use to give to Trinity today. You can visit our website at www.trinitychurchofaustin.org and click on the Support tab and scroll down that page to see the options there. You may download the Give Plus mobile app from either iTunes or Google Play, and you can also text your offering to 512-967-0292 and use the keyword SPECIAL to support Texas Cure today. And if you want to give to both the general fund and the special offering, you can send 2 texts, one with that keyword SPECIAL and one without. Please send your most generous offerings to Trinity today.
Hey Trinity, this is your intern minister Gus here. I have a few announcements before the service ends today. As usual, Pastoral Care is available if you need to reach out for any reason whatsoever. You can either find Sid's cell phone number, direct contact in the description of the video, or you can send an email to pastoralcare@trinitychurchofaustin.org. And that email just goes to myself, Mark, and Sid, just the pastoral staff. We're also still doing great work out of our physical church building through Hope Food Pantry and their efforts. You can find out how to donate to them on their website at hopefoodpantryaustin.org or from our website /support. We also have an upcoming Wednesday night class that's starting this Wednesday. That's with Sid Hall, our lead minister. It's called The Resurgence of Cosmic Storytellers. This video series is by physicist and spiritual humanist Brian Swim, and it's 10 weeks, and it'll be Wednesday nights from 8 to 9 p.m. starting this Wednesday. For info for the class, you can contact office@trinitychurchofaustin.org via email, and they'll send you a link to the Google Hangout. You don't need any accounts to join. You just be able to click on the link. And then the last announcement I have is that the adult groups are still meeting virtually, just like we had Sunday mornings when we were meeting physically. So the Sunday morning groups that meet are the Happy Heretics Bible Study group, the Lydia group, and the Social Justice class. So those are Sunday mornings. And then Thursday nights, there's a Trinity Parents Care of the Soul group that gets together to support one another in parenting. For info on how to join these, you can reach out to office@trinitychurchofaustin.org via email, and we'll send you the contact information directly there. That's all I have, and before we go to the benediction, I'll hand it over to a brief announcement.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Molnar.
And I'm Rolando Pettis.
And we have the privilege of representing Trinity Church of Austin at the Rio, Texas Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church, usually held in June.
This year, because of the pandemic, the in-person meeting has been postponed until October. However, to ensure that local churches have leadership continuity, a virtual session of the Rio, Texas clergy was held on June 10th. During that meeting, we're pleased to announce that our lead minister, Sid Hall, was appointed to Trinity for another year.
His reappointment means that this week, Sid began his 40th year as an ordained Methodist minister, his 42nd year under appointment as a United Methodist minister, and his 33rd year as the lead minister of Trinity Church of Austin.
We're so glad he's chosen to stick with Trinity for another year. We're certainly glad to have him, and we know you join us in celebrating this important milestone for Sid.
And now may the peace of God go with us. May the power of God sustain us. And may the love of God keep us together forever. Amen.